I am from the Doherty Art Center. I coordinate the exhibits program there. And welcome to another installment of our DAC Demo Days. And today we're really happy to welcome Marianne Levy.
Hi, my name is Marianne Levy. I'm teaching this online class called Adding Depth to Underglazes. I live in Austin. I'm a ceramic artist for the most part. I'm in my garage right now, so you're seeing me in my my kind of cluttered space. But this is where I work, in my garage. And this class is this is actually my first online class, so bear with me if I'm a little bit tongue-tied. But anyway, so this class will be about an alternative method of applying underglaze, using a copper wash and like a thin, also a thin layer of a kind of a glaze, a thin glaze on top of it. So I thought I would start by just reading an artist statement that was kind of related to the show I just had at the Doherty last year, and then show some pieces where I have used this technique, and some of those pieces were at the show. Okay, so adding depth to underglazes. This was a technique that I think I learned about 20 years ago, and I've been using it really consistently. It's just a very easy way of glazing, basically, using underglazes, and it just gives a little bit more variety in the effect. And you can also use it. It's something that I've had to experiment with to kind of understand, how to control the effects, but I'll talk about that. So I've always been drawn to working with the figure, whether it be human or animal. I often combine elements from the animal or natural world with the human form to express a fundamentally animalistic side of human nature. I'm also interested in incorporating symbols and myth into my work in an effort to discover new representations of those images or stories. So I'm just going to start with some pieces that where I've used this glazing technique, and I'm going to start with, so the technique involves using a copper wash underneath. The technique I'm going to show after the slides, so you'll be able to see how I do it, but I'm showing the slides ahead of time to kind of show the variety in which you can kind of control how much copper and how much wash, and also higher temperature can have an effect on the amount of sheen or just the amount of kind of speckled look to the copper that comes underneath it. So I'm starting from a lighter application and a lower firing temperature first, and then I'll work through towards kind of the higher temperature, more copper, more of the wash, to show you how much of a variety of sheen you can get. So with this piece, it's really only the top portion that I use the underglaze and the copper wash in this glaze. The bottom, the green shiny, is actually just a commercial, I think it's a Dunkin' commercial glaze. And so this was kind of a thin wash of the copper. And then I use what do you call it? A sprayer to spray. So you can see how I've sprayed at the top. It's kind of a chartreuse down to the bottom where it's more of a maroon color. So I do use a sprayer to get that effect of like highlighting certain areas and using different colors of underglaze to get like a gradation of color. So it's just the top portion that you see where I've used this. And this is an urn. It actually, it's a lit, the head comes off and it's like a vessel, an empty vessel. This was from the show from the Doherty. I was using a lot of imagery from the Grimm fairy tales and kind of incorporating animals into the story. So this is Little Red Riding Hood. This is a little more copper, so you can kind of see the speckled areas where it looks kind of dark under the red cape. I believe I fired it to 06 probably because it's not very shiny. The variety of temperature is really just from 06 to 04, 04 being a higher temperature. I went anywhere from 06 to 05 to 04. This was probably around 06 and 05. So not as high a temperature. I did definitely use the effect of spraying. If you can see some red highlights like on top of the wolf's head, that was sprayed, like a red sprayed on top of a gray. This was also from the show Grimm Rearticulated. To get the lines to show in the dress, I did use not a ton of copper, but I made sure that the copper got into those areas so that those lines were easily seen. And this one, same, probably, this one probably was about 06 because it's not very shiny. It's pretty matte looking. I did use the technique of highlighting with different colors of underglaze. So from the bottom, I think I sprayed like kind of a green underglaze or a beige. I think it was the beige underglaze with the red sprayed on top of that. So.
And we have a question that somebody posted. They'd like to know, would underglazes work the same way with red iron oxide? Will underglaze colors react with the oxide?
Not as much. I used to use a lot of iron oxide, but it doesn't show up as much as the copper. So, but that is something you can use. I believe it's been a while since I've used it, but I did used to use it quite a bit, and it's just, it doesn't seem to have as much coming through the underglaze as copper. So this was also from the show. This is a piece called Journey. It was, it's not really a Grimm fairy tale, but it was based on Alice in Wonderland, where Alice becomes the rabbit or a jackalope. So there was quite a bit of copper, as you can see the lines in her face. That's the copper underneath, and there is a little more sheen. This one I probably took to 05, and I definitely was using the highlighting on the dress, where I used teal for the color of the dress, and then I highlighted it with a little bit of light red just to kind of give a little bit of variety in the color. This is a pretty old piece. The sheen that you see on the face, I believe I probably sprayed a little bit more of the thin glaze on that area, and then the dress part of the headdress, I sprayed probably less because it looks a little more matte. And I was also using the highlighting technique of, like, I think that was 3 different colors sprayed onto that headdress cloth part. Probably used the terracotta, the light red, and then the an off-white color.
And then we've got a really interesting question. It says, if you are using air drying clay, is there a way we can paint these? Is there any way we can get a similar effect?
Well, if you buy an airbrush, I think with that tool you can use paint, so you wouldn't get that. I mean, I would imagine you can just use paint. You could do like a black. If you're just going to use paint, you could spray it with just a paint color. And I've never done this before. And if you wanted things to show up in the cracks, I think some people have used ink and then washed the ink off after they've applied the paint, if that makes any sense. But I haven't really tried it, so I'm not really sure. But the tool that I use for spraying can be used for paint as well. So this one is a newer piece. I did a bunch of Little Red Riding Hoods, and this is another one of those. This was probably, I believe I fired it to 04 because you can kind of see parts of the cape that are a little shiny. So that's kind of that's where the copper has kind of pooled, as well as the glaze. And I believe I took this one to 04, so it's just to give it a little more sheen. Yep. Let's see. And this one, that I'm sorry, didn't have a whole picture because I think this piece, I sold this to somebody and I don't have the whole picture, but it does show where I had a lot of cracks in the face and I used a lot of copper. And so that's what you see coming through with the green is copper. And then the black areas is also copper. And this piece, definitely I fired to a higher temperature. The blue horns is a glaze. So it's really just the red areas that's underglaze with copper, with a lot of copper, because you can kind of see how speckled it got. And then probably a thicker layer of the thin glaze and then a higher temperature. So that's how it can get a little more glossy. And this piece I actually is from a mold that I made, and I'm gonna be demonstrating on this piece. I have a finished one, and then I have like a before, this is what it looks like without glaze. So this will be the demo piece from today. And I'm just showing my supply list, basically Velvet Underglaze, Amico. I've tried Mako, but I've had less success with Mako, definitely. Amico's a little pricier, just a little bit, but it's worth it. They are just a lot more stable. They don't chip off. And then for the glaze, it's just just the Ferrofrit 3110, Ferrofrit 3124. You can buy these, at most ceramic supplies. And then I have copper carbonate. And then for just mixing, I don't use, for these two washes or glazes, I don't have to measure anything. It's basically just a very easy way to measure just with a tablespoon. And then I use yogurt containers and I fill those with water and then just a brush. So, and these are the tools I use. These are just really cheap, easy to use tools for the spraying. I don't recommend this particular tool for thick glaze because it's really just made for airbrush techniques and for thinner glaze. So it will get clogged if you use this for a thicker glaze, but it's what I use and they're just really easy to use. So this is the copper wash recipe. It's just 1 to 2 tablespoons of copper carbonate and 32 ounces of water. And then the thin clear glaze is the Ferrofrit 3110 and 3124, and then just a container of water. And so that you can experiment with this if you want a glossier finish. The 3124 makes more gloss. The 3110 is real matte. So I just combine a little bit to get, because I like kind of in between, just a little bit of sheen. But if you wanted to experiment adding more 3124, you would get a glossier surface. Okay. And I wear gloves because really all this stuff, especially the copper, you don't want it to get on your skin. It's not, I would say that it's just safer if you wear gloves. So yeah, so my copper is just in this container. It's just water with the copper carbonate, and the copper carbonate is just a powder. It looks like this, comes in a bag. So what I'm gonna do is just start to brush it on my piece, try to make sure that I get it in all the cracks if I want the cracks to show up, which I do. Can y'all see me doing this? Yeah. Now I'll put it like this. And then you can also experiment with how much copper you put in the wash. If you want darker, put more copper. If you want less, sometimes I do just a real light ratio of copper to water if I don't really want it to show that much.
Does the type of brush you use to apply it make any difference?
No, I use like the real cheap Home Depot just because it takes more time if you use a little bitty brush, but no, it doesn't matter. But these work really well. These, you know, these are like $1 or $2 a piece. I just try to make sure I get it in all the cracks. Okay, so I've got that on there. Now I just I take a sponge and I've got my I've got like a bowl of water over here. And I start to wipe it off so that it's really just going to show up in the cracks, and I can kind of control where that copper is going to show up. Okay. All right, so I'm going to start to spray the underglaze, and I'm going to wear a mask while I do it, so just bear with me while I put that on, and I'm going to take these off. Oh, before I do that, I should probably say, because I'm not going to be able to talk as well. So I'm using 2 colors to start with, teal blue, which is this one, and then the light red. And then my sprayer is, the bottles are real little, which is nice. If you want to just do different colors, you can get different bottles, and it's not as much of a cleanup if it's smaller bottles, containers, which is nice about this sprayer. So. All right, and then with my sprayer on, it's going to be a little more noisy. But I'm going to start with this color. Okay.
Did you just add more water to it?
Yes. as you can see, my sprayer is, you have to kind of play with the amount of water in the underglaze because my sprayer doesn't like very thick application. I kind of have to stop what I'm doing and add water sometimes. I probably did about 3 coats altogether for the for the first layer of underglaze. I will need to kind of clean my sprayer to do the second. I'll do the red on top of that, but I have, let's see, oops. This is just some water to clean out the, I gotta turn it back on, hold on. To clean out the sprayer with the blue, I have to kind of put water through it. And sometimes I add a little vinegar to the water because it's real easy for the sprayer to get clogged. So it kind of eats away the gunk inside the sprayer. Okay. So this is the light red. I'm going to add a little more water just in case. So just before I put this on again, I'm gonna spray the red kind of at like above coming from this face area so that I can kind of get like the top of the nose, the top of the head, maybe a little bit of the ear and a little bit of the mouth. So it looks like it's kind of light hitting it. So you can kind of see how it's highlighted. I don't know if you can see it, but it's highlighted in red. It's kind of hard to see it in this with my camera. And then, so the last thing I'm gonna do is to, I've got the thin glaze here. It really settles really fast, so I always have to mix it again before, like there's a bunch of the frit at the bottom, so I have to mix it back up again. I gotta clean off my bat real quick. So for the thin glaze, I usually do 3 applications.
Someone is asking, you put clear on the bottom?
Clear on the bottom? Well, this glaze is clear right now, so it's really just like a thin clear, like a very thin clear. You can see it's a little bit white. So it is a clear glaze. I'm not sure what they were asking, to be honest.
Robin, is it because the issue of it sticking to the kiln?
Oh, you want to know about whether it sticks to the kiln? Is that the question?
Yes. Won't it stick?
It will not stick. It will, well, depending. So I typically, if it matters what the underneath of the piece looks like, I will put it on a stilt. If it doesn't matter what the back of the piece looks like, and for this piece it won't because it's going to be hung on the wall, the glaze, actually it doesn't stick. It sometimes just a little chip of the kiln shelf might come off. So it's probably better to put a stilt, but it's not a very, there's not a lot of, I guess it's not a high glass or flux glaze, maybe at higher temperature, but I've only taken it to 04, so yeah. So I typically will go back after I've like applied it, and then maybe add more in holes or pockets. I'll add more of that that wash, and I'm looking for a brush, like a smaller brush. So let me clean it. So I'll just, like, in the nostrils, I'm just gonna add a little bit more in there. And in the eyes. And ears. Put some in the mouth. And that's about it. I'll probably go back and take off, because the eyes, I want to do a different color for the eyes. I'll take off, like with a brush, you can just brush off the underglaze, like where the eye is. I can just take a brush and kind of take that off, because I'm going to do a different, like a shiny glaze on the eye. So I can just brush off that underglaze. that's it. That's it for that. And this, you know, I'll probably go to 05. I don't want it to be too shiny. And I did, when I can kind of see like the whole piece is sort of a white color, I know that my application is a little thicker. And to control the amount of sheen, I'll take it to a lower temperature, if that makes sense. But yeah, this is what it looks like now. And this is what it looks, I think I used the same colors with this other piece. So this is before and after it's fired. But my computer is splashed with Underglaze.
All right, so we've got a question already, and the person asks, in the original photo, the eyes are a clear blue and very shiny. How did you do that?
So that was a glaze, like a glaze that I made. And yeah, that was the only part of the piece that was not using the underglaze. So it was a pre-made, well, it was made by me. It wasn't a commercial glaze.
And is the process usually that quick for you? Like, or did you just work quickly for the sake of the demo? I'm just, you know, curious, because that was like, it seemed like a really, you needed to do it fast type of process.
Well, typically I would probably let a color dry a little bit more. So I did do it a little quicker than normal. But it's pretty quick. I mean, and sometimes you have to mask parts of the piece that you don't want to hit a color, you know, so you know, I use painter's masking tape to mask off areas that I don't want to spray a color on, which takes a lot of time. So yeah.
And then somebody's asking about the beautiful sculpture behind you. How would you glaze that?
That piece, I very, very light copper wash, and a couple underglaze colors. I think I used like the red and the light red, and then the deep yellow, and it's not very glossy at all. It's pretty dry. It's pretty matte. So probably just a really light spray of the thin glaze, but not a lot of copper. Yeah, I think it's hard to see from here, but there's two birds that are kind of going into these flowers.
And then somebody commented, my pieces are usually smaller and with finer detail. Can the same technique be used in a more controlled sort of way, like with a brush?
Yeah, and that same company that I bought, the Pashi is the name brand. They have or even, I mean, a lot of other brands carry where it's like a pin-sized airbrush. I've never tried to use it, but it's just it's a much finer point. I've never tried to use it before, but I would imagine that you could, you know, have like a much smaller surface area, you know, you could control it a little bit better for smaller surface areas. But yeah, it's like a pin size airbrush, and I would imagine you can use underglaze with those.
Are these sculptures stoneware or earthware? And does the clay type affect the firing temp?
The clay body that I use is a mid-fire clay body that if you know, if I was making functional work, I would fire to cone 5 or 6, but because it's not functional, I only take it to 04. I tend to just like hand building with that mid-range clay better than the terracotta. For me, it's just a better, I don't know why I don't like terracotta. It's I just don't like the texture of it, and building with it I find to be a little bit harder. So it's a mid-range clay with some iron in it, and it's got grog in it too, so it's good for hand building.
Do you get much of the green of the copper bleed through into lighter underglazes?
Oh yeah, and the lighter the underglaze color, the more copper will show. And the thicker your application of copper, the more copper will show. and the higher temperature you go. It's something that you just experiment with, and you get to know how it works.
I just want to say thank you again to everybody for joining us.
Thanks for coming. Yeah, thanks for coming to my first online class. Thank you for coming.
Bye. Thank you.